So today we are going to look at the Siege of Antioch. And yeah.
During the summer of 1097, the Seljuk scorched earth policy, coupled with the difficult terrain, stripped the Westerners from their most powerful tool, their heavy war mounts. Some fell from cliffs, and others perished from lack of water, forcing many knights to ride oxen, mules, or simply travel on foot, while
You have to give it to the Seljuks, the neutralizing the heavy horse, which knights are kind of known for. Really good move. Again, scorched earth policy once again proves to be very effective against enemy armies. And yeah. But look at how much of the territory the Romans have gained. Good on them.
goats, sheep, and dogs were used as pack animals. Soldiers were so dehydrated that on the rare occasion that water sources were found, many suffocated themselves as they drank too much. After arriving at Heraclea, the army divided into two. The bulk of the forces took the longer route north through Cappadocia and then east, circling the formidable Antitaurus, while a smaller contingent took the direct approach via the Cilician gates. This strategy resulted from careful and cunning planning on behalf of Alexios, who wanted to ensure a base of operations which could be used for supplies and later reinforcement, but also provides us with an idea of how well disciplined and coordinated the Council of Princes really was. The expedition in Cilicia...
Yeah, definitely. Like, there is obviously competence. At least, like, when you... Let's compare it to the People's Crusade, which was just a mob running around, and this crusade. Definitely has its issues, but, like, you can tell these people are kind of experienced in what they're doing, you know? And, like, at least plan more. And, for whatever faults they have, you know, there is a sense of competency here, right?
was commanded by Baldwin of Boulogne and Tancred, the supporting side characters of their more renowned relatives Godfrey and Bohemond, who now had the opportunity to prove their worth. Tancred led no more than 200 men, but was accompanied by an Armenian guide, allowing him to arrive at Tarsus before Baldwin, who had between 300 and 500 troops. What used to be the capital of the region, and the place where Mark Antony first met Cleopatra, was now a
Oh, really? A stone's archway, Cleopatra's Gate, still stands, commemorating her majestic arrival, but even this was built after the event as a tourist attraction in the 2nd century. Local Turks have given it the less... Oh. Oh man, that's hilarious.
a meager town, which lost its port to centuries of sedimentation. On September 21, 1097, the Seljuk garrison rushed out to meet Tancred in open battle, but they were easily beaten back. The Norman then taunted the enemy, claiming that he was merely the vanguard of a massive Christian force. The following morning, he received their surrender and raised his banner on the citadel. That same day, Baldwin arrived and feasted beneath the city walls alongside the Normans. Despite being absent from any engagements, he suggested that they were to share the spoils equally, and since he had the larger force, Tancred had to begrudgingly accept. His banner was replaced and thrown into a nearby marsh.
Okay, now we're getting into, you know, at first it was kind of helping the Romans, but I remember from the Extra History series, it eventually just starts these guys just wanting their own territory, their own land, they're essentially founding the Crusader kingdoms. So eventually that they just kind of abandon the Romans essentially fully and go full on, like, and some of these guys do want their own inheritance. Like back in like Europe, they kind of lost out in claiming inheritances, and some of them sold everything they had to this, so you can tell they want land, they want territory of their own, and I think this is the part of the series where that starts revving up, where they start taking their own stuff, and not for the Roman cause. I mean, granted, they were barely doing it for the Roman cause as it is, but now I think we're gonna get to the, especially as we go more eastward, to where they start just having their own kingdoms. But again, it's just funny to see, like, these guys and the way they butt heads and stuff.
Within hours, he gathered his troops and rode east. A month later, at dusk, a force of 300 southern Italian Normans arrived in order to reinforce Tancred, but were refused entry into Tarsus, forcing them to make camp under the walls. Unseen, the bulk of the Seljuk garrison slipped through the night and butchered them as they slept, before riding off into the distance. A rumour began circulating that Baldwin was actually responsible, and fearing for his life, he locked himself in a tower waiting for the storm to pass, before installing his own garrison and leaving a week later. But the bloody stain would never be forgotten. Meanwhile, Tancred had made it to Mamistra, where he was warmly welcomed by the local Armenians, who accepted him as their new ruler after the Seljuk garrison fled. Like clockwork, Baldwin arrived a few days later and camped near the city, but this time Tancred would not back down. The first Crusader confrontation was brief.
Oh my gosh.
Pin verification.
And more of a brawl than a battle.
Again, you see the thing, Baldwin is just trying to use his superior numbers just to kind of get anything Tancred wants. My goodness.
Some men were seriously injured, but no one was killed, and both sides made peace the next day before going on their separate ways. Tancred garrisoned Mamistra with 50 men, secured the port of Alexandretta, and met up with the main crusading host on its way to Antioch after establishing friendly relations and a stable base in Armenian Cilicia. As for Baldwin, his adventure was just beginning. While the rest of the Crusaders prepared to head south, he was guided by an Armenian named Bagrat, who promised great riches and fertile lands to the east. Accompanied by just 100 knights, he took a page from Tancred's book, and was able to capture the towns of Tel Bashir and Ravindel with little more than a bluff. Initially, he rewarded Bagrat.
Another funny part about the First Crusade that I remember about from like extra history's telling, again, like there comes the point where they all start establishing their own kingdoms, and again, they essentially just go in their own side quest, essentially. As you can see here, they start splintering and just going off to do their own stuff, which is just funny to see, you know?
With lordship over the latter city. But before long, a plot was uncovered, and Baldwin hunted him down and brutally tortured him. News of these conquests soon spread, reaching the ear of Thoros, the Armenian ruler of Edessa, who was barely holding on to power. The two men formed an alliance, formalized in a bizarre ritual, during which both men stripped to their waist and embraced each other under a long shirt, sealing a union between father and adopted son.
Yeah, that's a bit weird. I mean, actually, I'll take that back. Different customs. I don't want to be disrespectful towards a different custom. But yeah, essentially, like, I think Baldwin kills him, doesn't he? He's like, alright, you're my adoptive son, cool, and then murders him. I think that's what happens, if I remember correctly.
With his newfound Latin son, Thoros dispatched Baldwin at the head of an Armenian force to deal with his Seljuk rival from Samosata. On his return to Edessa, the Crusader uncovered a plot by Edessene nobles aiming to assassinate Thoros. Baldwin neither aided nor turned them in, hoping to see where the wind blows, and in March 1098, the locals rebelled against their ruler and ripped him to pieces.
Ooh.
Baldwin immediately jumped on the opportunity and established an iron grip over the city, which would become the base of the future County of Edessa, the first Crusader state, carved out with just 100 men and questionable morality.
Again, he just went off on his own side quest. Like, Baldwin was like, cool, alright, goodbye guys, and then just went off and just essentially founded his own state. That's insane. That's hilarious. They just started side questing this crap. Man.
Meanwhile, the main body of the Crusader army took Marash on October 10th of 1097 and prepared to attack Antioch. At its peak, it was the third city of the Roman Empire, but its role in the region was now diminished due to the rise of neighboring Aleppo and Damascus. The Latins could have taken Jerusalem without it, but if they wanted to keep it, they needed this strategic target, which had immense value to all Christians. Luckily for them, those same cities were now fighting for dominance, while Antioch stood alone in the backdrop of the fragmented Seljuk Empire. Ruled by its ambitious and very capable Turkoman named Yaghisiyan, who struggled to preserve his domain amidst civil war, pockets of Shiite Arabs, numerous Christian subjects, and now an impending zealous army with quite the reputation. But now, let's look at what he had going for him. A very capable Seljuk garrison of 5,000 men alongside 800 soldiers, incredibly well-built walls, 20 meters high and 2 meters thick, covering a large area, including a hill featuring a formidable citadel 500 meters above the city, from which the defenders could track every Frankish move. There were foothills which could be turned into farmland, but above all, the geography made this city nearly impossible to take. The city was protected by a mountain to the east, while the Orontes River flowed in a way that if an army wanted to surround Antioch, it had to cross it, separating the camp in 3 on its west and south side. In mid-October, the leaders of the Crusade gathered together to discuss how they would tackle this challenge. Tatikius came forward and proposed that they fortify themselves to the north and harass the garrison from afar, a long and drawn-out strategy that worked in 969 during the Byzantine Reconquista of the Macedonian dynasty period. But the majority decided on a more direct approach. Raymond of Toulouse was convinced that if the Crusaders took too long, many would desert during the winter, something which had already started to occur during the difficult trek in the mountains. Satellite fortresses were captured, with contingents securing Bagras, Arta, and the Iron Bridge, opening the road to the coveted city. But once the Crusaders met the imposing defences high above them, all hopes of a direct assault dissipated. 30,000 Latins, half of which were non-combatants, made camp against just 3 of the 6 main gates on the 20th of October, centred around the northwestern corner. Bohemond took up position in front of the St. Paul Gate, while the remaining Italian Normans, led by Tancred, camped behind. The northern French blockaded the Dog Gate, Godfrey of Bouillon held the Gate of the Duke, and the Byzantine contingent acted as reserves. Siege warfare was a staple of medieval European warfare, which also came with certain traditions. Namely, the first banner to fly above the walls of a newly conquered city represented a strong claim to it. And it is here that we find that Bohemond was starting to show some of his ambition, being the first to arrive and positioning his forces against the most crucial gate of the 3. In the first 2...
Yeah, Bohemond's a pretty, I think if I remember correctly, he could be very cunning, and obviously he wasn't there out of the kindness of his heart to help the Romans. I think he was an old enemy of them. Obviously there's a lot of self-interest, as that's the point of the first crusade. I mean, most crusades, but especially here, as we can see, these guys are, obviously the religious aspect, fervor, repentance plays a part, but there's also, what can I get out of this? Self-interest is a part of these things, and obviously they want that, especially to Antioch. At least I know that it's past its heyday and whatnot, but still symbolically a very important place, and taking it, it would kind of have its own prestige in a sense, right? At least in terms of a historical sense. And yeah.
Weeks, both sides were sizing each other up, which resulted in the calmest period, during which Yaghisiyan sent out his sons to search for aid. And the Crusaders enjoyed plentiful supplies from the rich valley. Fearing mutiny, the Seljuks expelled a large portion of its Christian population, while many Armenians took the chance to visit the Crusader camp and report back to Yaghisiyan what they saw. Suddenly, this army that took down the Sultanate of Rum didn't seem so threatening, and the strategy changed entirely. Arrows were shot from atop the citadel, while mounted archers sallied out and harassed the camp, racing back across the bridge when given chase. Harim, a nearby fortress, was still in Muslim hands and was used as a base from which raids were continuously launched. By mid-November, the winter cold was setting in, supplies were waning, and heavy rains poured on the Christian force. The Crusaders were putting barely any pressure on the city, while the city continued to receive rich caravans from the south. In order to turn the tide, the Latins built a bridge over the Orontes River by tying small boats together, which was difficult to cross. The maneuver allowed the Crusaders access to the sea via the crucial port of St. Simeon, which received regular shipments of supplies from Byzantine Cyprus. This entry point allowed the Franks to send and receive letters from the west, resulting in a rare collaboration between Bishop Adhemar and the exiled Patriarch of Jerusalem, who drafted—
Alright, that was smart. That was a smart maneuver there. Creative and kind of needing it because they couldn't block all the gates of Antioch, so they were essentially at that disadvantage of just like, well, they're still getting supplies, so at least they've managed to establish a supply line in a sense through that.
A letter asking the West to send a new wave of reinforcements to the Holy Land. On the 17th of November, 13 Genoese ships even made it to the port, bringing vital craftsmen and materials, which were used to build a fort on the slopes of Mount Storin called Malregard. Next, Bohemond was chosen to deal with Harim, which he did by employing step tactics, namely a feigned retreat. This drew out the small garrison, which was then smashed by a heavy cavalry charge, personally led by Bohemond.
Again, Bohemond, a very cunning man on his own, and you can see also, like, a military man, obviously, with experience in fighting and whatnot. You can see that, like, a lot of these Crusader guys can be cunning in both a good and bad way, like, underhanded, like with Baldwin, but, like, you know, like, still though, it is impressive to see.
The fortress didn't fall, but its garrison was neutralized. According to eyewitness reports from the Crusader camp, those whom we captured were led before the city gate and were beheaded to grieve the Turks who were in the city. The garrison immediately responded in kind, according to the same report. Alas, how many Christians, Greeks, Syrians and Armenians who lived in the city were killed by the maddened Turks. With the Franks looking on, they threw outside the walls the heads of those killed with their catapults and slings. This especially grieved our people. The Greek Christian Patriarch of Antioch was regularly suspended from the walls upside down, while the guards beat his feet with iron rods. Both sides were determined to win, no matter the cost.
Yeah, it's the equal brutality on both parts, right? It's... ouch, man.
With the coming of December, the shipments became infrequent, and hunger began to set in. Foraging parties ventured far from the camp, and many were picked off, never to be seen again. Merchants from Cilicia became one of the few lifelines for many, but greed and the dangers of making the journey led the traders to jack up their prices, which caused mass desertion amongst the poor. Those who could not afford to feed themselves were losing health, which led to the rapid spread of disease, causing the death of a fifth of the army.
My goodness.
After celebrating a grim Christmas, Bohemond and Robert of Flanders left camp on a mission to find supplies, taking 400 knights and at least as many infantry with them east. The expedition did manage to find a significant amount of forage in the fertile area of Jabal as-Samak, raiding nearby villages. While camping near the town of Al-Bara, the group made one of the worst strategic mistakes one can make. They didn't post scouts, and suddenly realized that a 10,000 strong army was on the horizon.
Yeah, that's insane. We've seen, like, very seldomly in this channel. We've seen it, but it's like very seldom to not send out scouts, simply due to the fact that you don't know what's ahead of you, and like not scouting just seems like a very bad and amateur mistake to make, you know? But yeah.
The combined force of Damascus and Homs, led by the formidable Atabeg Tugtegin, was equally surprised to find the raiding party on the 31st of December after they answered Antioch's call for aid. Robert instantly rallied his knights and charged against the overwhelming force, stopping the Muslim force. Bohemond stayed back, pouncing at the right moment as the enemy was trying to flank his ally. Rather than risk failure for themselves and the entire crusade, the men retreated back into camp, abandoning all of the supplies they had managed to gather, as well as those who were on foot. Such was the lack of war steeds that most of the cavalry chased after a single horse, who had lost his rider and galloped west. When the dust settled, the troops from Damascus regrouped and attacked the fleeing footmen, killing or capturing most of them. The blow inflicted by the Crusader force was not fatal, but it did discourage the already disinterested Muslim troops from continuing their expedition, so they headed back to Damascus.
Wow.
Over the next few days, Robert returned to pick up a few stragglers and supplies, but overall, despite preventing utter disaster, the mission failed to resupply the camp. But Bohemond and Robert's absence didn't go unnoticed. The all-seeing Citadel reported the troop movement to Yaghi-Siyan, who ordered the garrison to sally out and attack the Crusader camp. To make matters worse, Robert of Normandy was absent, visiting a nearby port, and Godfrey was ill. Rushing out of the bridge gate, the Seljuks charged at the Provençal camp, where they met Raymond of Toulouse. After a quick engagement, the garrison force began to flee, as the southern French gave chase. Upon approaching the bridge gate, more enemies from both sides emerged, turning the attack into a rout. Men snatched riders from their saddles and pulled at their horses' tails, killing 15 knights and 20 footmen. Amidst the chaos, the bannerman of Bishop Adhemar, the spiritual leader of the crusade selected by Pope Urban himself, was slain.
Ooh.
The next day, the prized banner was flown atop the wall of Antioch, taunting the besiegers.
Yeah, they're trying to break their morale. Like, again, the Turks have been utilizing hit-and-run tactics. That seems to be their kind of, like, you know, bread and butter, as it were. So yeah, and again, just the psychological warfare on display. We see the Crusaders are being weared out by, like, attrition, and doing stuff like this is just incredibly, it's gut-punching, you know?
Who saw the flag depicting the Virgin Mary and felt like a legion who had lost its eagle. The turn of the year signaled the lowest point of the crusade. After crossing thousands of kilometers and enduring countless attacks and terrible weather, the Crusaders were nearing their breaking point. An eyewitness reports, "At that time, the famished ate the shoots of bean seeds growing in the fields, and many kinds of herbs unseasoned with salt, also thistles, which, being not well cooked because of the deficiency of firewood, pricked the tongues of those eating them. Also horses, asses, camels, dogs, and rats. The poorer ones even ate the skins of the beasts and the seeds of grain found in manure."
Ugh.
Simultaneously, the men witnessed a comet and aurora, felt an earthquake, and interpreted the signs as God's displeasure. It was at this crucial point when the clergy stepped up and decided to restore the faith by blaming it all on the sins of those involved. "We believed that these misfortunes befell the Franks, and that they were not able for so long a time to take the city because of their sins. Not only dissipation, but also avarice or pride or rapaciousness corrupted them." Bishop Adhemar took measures into his own hands, and began advocating that all women should be expelled from the camp, and the rest should fast for 3 days and form a procession around the city's walls. Theft and fornication were forbidden, and anyone who broke the rules was publicly punished. Around this time, a man and woman were caught in the act of adultery before being stripped and whipped for the whole army to see. These measures generally had a positive effect in restoring morale and discipline to the camp.
Alright.
But there were still some who deserted the cause, including none other than Peter the Hermit, who was caught trying to leave during the night.
Freaking Peter. I keep forgetting that he's still there after the disaster he caused with the People's Crusade. But, alright, so Adamir right here, man, he's using the religious thing, because, like, a lot of these, like, you know, normal foot soldiers and stuff, they were there for the spiritual cause. That's kind of, I imagine, like, the big part of it. So him practicing these religious things is a smart move on his part to get the people, like, back on the spiritual mindset, focus on God, everything else will be fine. So good on him for that point. Like, this is a morale. This is really a battle against attrition we're witnessing right here. Like, it seems like, yeah, I know we're mainly focusing on the Crusaders, and certainly the garrison is having its own effects, but, like, the Crusaders are battling just the elements and, like, their own dwindling supplies, more often than not, right?
But by far the most impactful departure was that of Byzantine general Tatikius. Seeing the conditions reach an all-time low, the man who acted as quartermaster and representative of Alexios pledged to sail to Constantinople and come back with ships full of supplies.
I don't think he comes back, though.
To make a strong
Does he?
statement.
I forgot.
He even left all of his belongings in the camp. But for reasons which will become clear later, the shipments arrived, but the general did not. Writing with the benefit of hindsight, every Frankish chronicler will condemn both the emperor and his general, and many of their reports failed to mention these dozens of shipments, which allowed the siege to even reach this point. It was now late January of 1098, and Bohemond himself threatened to leave the campaign, stating that he lacked the funds to pay for his soldiers, which led to creating a common war chest, sponsored by Raymond, aimed at financing the purchase and maintenance of mounts. To ensure...
Yeah. So yeah, Raymond's paying for all of it. Yeah, that's hilarious. He literally has to financially now carry the team.
For the army's cohesion, all Crusader leaders pledged to stay in the camp for 7 years, or until Antioch was taken.
Okay, that's just commitment. They're really... I mean, we've heard of long sieges before, not like, you know, but man, these guys are in it. That's kind of inspiring in that sense, you know?
Garrison never stopped harassing the Crusaders, and during one of the many skirmishes, a glimmer of hope was born, as a high-ranking Seljuk nobleman was captured. After learning that his family commanded one of the towers, the Latins negotiated secret access to their tower as ransom, but Yaki Sayan uncovered the plot and relieved the family from their command. The Crusaders began torturing their high-profile prisoner, but to no avail. Just when things couldn't get any worse, the first days of February brought the news that a new army was approaching Antioch from the east. Ridwan of Aleppo gathered 12,000 men in order to lift the siege and gave the council an impossible task. The answer was in the form of 700 knights, riding the last healthy steeds the Crusaders could muster under the command of Bohemond. This was a big step, taken under desperation and based on his previous successes. With no infantry...
Man, okay, Bohemond's gonna have to, like, really step up here. Obviously, Bohemond has proven himself as an incredibly competent, you know, warrior, and he's proven himself in that sense. But man, also it is quite the task to put on anyone to straight up face 12,000 people. Even, I mean, we know the quality of medieval knights, but even then, man.
To slow him down, the Normans set out and hid his men behind a hill near the Iron Bridge, separating his force into 6 squadrons. From there, the Latins waited for the long column moving in from Aleppo. On the morning of February 9th, Ridwan was marching down the road with 2 detachments as a vanguard away from his main force. Bohemond could have easily held a defensive position at the bridge, but instead he sprung his ambush, ordering 5 of his squadrons to charge directly at the column, while he held back. One eyewitness described these first minutes of battle. The din of battle arose to heaven. All were fighting at once, and the storm of missiles darkened the sky. Knowing that they were heavily outnumbered, these knights must have been terrified, but they played a crucial tactical role. Their shock attack drew Ridwan's main force forward into the heart of the battle. His massed troops now began to push the Crusaders back, and the Aleppans most likely felt that victory was at hand. In fact, this was the moment for which Bohemond had prepared.
My goodness, this man's playing chess right now. Bohemond, like, again, he even used, like, you know, the Turkish strategy of the feigned retreat. Like, you can tell he's adapting. Like, he's witnessing his enemies, and now this, through the sneak attack. Like, he's using, like, trickery, surprise. Like, he's doing so much with what little he has in certain situations. And I think that just goes to show just his how resourceful he is. I in my head I kept saying remorseful, and I'm like, no, that's not the word. But yeah.
The author of the Gesta Francorum, who was amongst Bohemond's troops, wrote an impassioned description of this attack. So Bohemond, protected on all sides by the sign of the cross, charged the Turkish forces like a lion which has been starving for 3 or 4 days, which comes roaring out of its cave thirsting for the blood of cattle. His attack was so fierce that the points of his banner were flying right over the heads of the Turks. The other troops, seeing Bohemond's banner carried ahead so honourably, stopped the retreat at once, and all our men in a body charged the Turks, who were amazed and took flight. Our men pursued them and massacred them right up to the Iron Bridge.
Dang, man.
The Norman bet the fate of the entire expedition on this brilliant move, and as the fleeing head of the enemy column started to trample those behind them, the knights who followed him recognized his genius. The garrison, having seen Bohemond leave camp once again, attempted a counterattack, but once again they were repelled. With the
genius. Great play on Bohemond's part, man. Like, that was just genius.
And booty won, we carried the heads of the slain to camp and stuck them on posts as grim reminders of the plight of their Turkish allies and of future woes of the besieged.
So, yeah, I'm gonna stop the video right here, but, again, Bohemond, MVP, I dub Bohemond. I give you the MVP award for this video, because man, did he carry.